Hi, we are going to discuss the copyright and regulations governing technology as in a case study. So as I'm going through this case study, what we know is that St. Regis School is a very small school and they get a lot of their funding for technology and resources through fundraisers. Their PTO ends up buying a lot of the stuff for them because they don't get a lot of federal funding. The largest school for their upper levels is 25 miles away. This does create some problems because then they're just not getting all the resources that they need, and the school district has worked very hard. Well, this school in particular has worked very hard to earn funds to purchase technology and software programs for people in the building of K-12. So the people that are involved in this situation are Mrs. Lynn, who is the library media specialist. She kind of plays a dual role because the school's so small that they can't hire a media specialist. There's St. Regis staff, and it is multiple teachers who are so excited to have new programs and new technology. They are wanting more resources so they can use it as a broader scale. Mrs. Brandon, who is a new teacher to St. Regis, and she has 3 years of experience in a larger school that clearly had very strict guidelines on copyright law that she knew very well. So it appears that she had been trained in the district's copyright policies and knows how to enforce them and when it's appropriate to use them. The principal is Mr. Sample, and he has been there for 3 years, and he has built some really great relationships with his staff that they are very comfortable addressing him and feel comfortable making decisions without having his approval all the time. Sorry, my computer is not wanting to work. All right. So our facts are the computer lab, which houses 20 computers, was created as a place for teachers to bring their classes. It is booked all the time. There are two teachers that really aren't using it that often, but for the most part, it's being used throughout the entire day. The PTO was able to purchase new software programs based on the needs identified by staff, and they prioritized what programs they needed the most, and that is where they started. Teachers are loving everything that is happening. They are loving the new programs. However, they would like to be able to use them inside their classroom and not just in a computer lab. So they have asked Mrs. Lynn to make copies of the software programs so each teacher can have their own and be able to access it whenever they need it. Mrs. Brandon found out about this and informed Mrs. Lynn that she is breaking software laws and not practicing proper fair use. Mrs. Lynn did not receive that very well, and so Mrs. Brandon went to Mr. Sample, who she felt very comfortable with, in explaining what had happened. So Mr. Sample is aware of the copyright violation, and he has now warned Mrs. Lynn. She is very proud of herself for being resourceful, thinks the PTO would appreciate it, and does not feel like they are going to be caught. So what is the main problem? Our main problem is that there is a violation of copyright laws taking place. Multiple copies of commercially produced computer programs. The copyright laws are there to protect the owner from loss of revenue made off their products. In this situation, Mrs. Lynn made a copy for every single person. There were probably a limited number of copies you can make, and that's pretty standard, like where you could, if you buy a Microsoft product, for example, that you could download it for that one-time use, but you might get something where you can download it on 2 computers, or you only get so many licenses. Usually those cost more, and they can be harder to get, or you may not have enough licenses, so you make copies to hand out, and that is where the problem's coming in. Mrs. Lynn does have great intent. She is trying to save money because the money is hard to come by. The teachers are very grateful to her for doing this. However, she is breaking the law. So legal issues that need to be considered. And school governance policies, like at this point in the case study, it is very unclear whether the school has any policies regarding copyright procedures or fair use, acceptable use policies. The staff is acting like they have not been trained on any such thing, so we are going to go ahead and assume that St. Regis does not have an acceptable use policy or a copyright policy in place. Legally, the copyright generally requires you to get permission before you make a copy, distribute, or reuse someone else's copyrighted work. Fairly standard with all materials. There's also the fair use policy, which supports educators in how we can make copies of materials and then reuse them in the classroom without always asking for permission. But the fair use is limited on how many copies you can make and how we can distribute those copies. In this situation, Mrs. Lynn has gone above and beyond the fair use, and that at this point won't even protect her. And so without having an acceptable use policy or a copyright policy in place, the district will need to create a school governance policy or plan to train their staff on the proper procedures so this doesn't occur in the future. So I put up two scenarios. They're both pretty obvious in how they're going to end. The first is allow teachers continue with their current practices of copying materials and distributing them for mass use. The second is create a school governance plan to include acceptable use policy and copyright policy. So solution one, we're going to continue to let people do this and run the risk of being fined. This is showing negligence on part of the school and on part of the district. Each person that continues to use the materials will be in violation, so it's just racking up more fines. And Mrs. Lynn, even though she did have good intent for reproducing the materials, if she had just stuck with the fair use and only made one copy that she could keep on hand in case something happened to the original, she would have fallen under fair use. But by mass producing, she's taking away revenue from the company, and this is where she no longer fits under the fair use policies. Solution two, we need to destroy all copied materials. End of story, everything needs to be destroyed. But the second thing would be to communicate to the staff district policies on copyright laws and just the copyright laws in general of what does it mean at the federal level and then what can the school district legally do. If those board policies do not exist, then a governance plan will need to be established to set the guidelines and then train the staff on how to properly copy materials without hitting any violations. So in our future situations, you have the opportunity to contact the company to ask for permission to copy any materials, and they can give you permission to copy 10 or they can give you permission to copy 0, but that would be a place to start. They also need to see if there are any Creative Commons license on the materials that are purchased. This license allows teachers and students to freely copy, share, and sometimes modify a Creative Commons work without having to seek permission. So then everybody would be protected and you would not be in fear of violating any copyright laws. Then the last one would be stay within the rights of educational copyright policies. There are several of them out there that give that give leeway to copyright when using in education. Like you might be able to use a clip of something in a classroom to demonstrate a video, or a clip of music as a background, but you can't use the whole song. So there needs to be some training regarding when and how we can copy materials without violation. The resources I used for this project, I kind of stayed within just 2 of them that we have used previously, and it was by the Educator's Guide to Creativity and Copyright and What is Creative Commons. So thank you guys for a great semester, and I hope everyone is doing well.